Jackson trying to escape and run for it, and he's got it more. Lamar Jackson down the sideline. Will they give it to him? They will. Touchdown, Baltimore.
And with 1:17 left to play on Wild Card Weekend, the Hayes in the barn.
Oh my God! I wish you guys could. I wish we had a camera in here so you could see what we're doing. We're just a bunch of clowns in here.
How much fun is that?
All right, welcome on back to another edition of the Baltimore Beatdown Podcast. It is Thursday, June 24th, 2021. Coming at you guys on a Thursday for the first time in a little while. My name is Jake Luke, joined in studio or in virtual studio by Spencer and Nathaniel Schultz. How's it going, bud?
Doing well. Had this pinched nerve in my neck, so I've been going through hell and high water to get rid of that, get some Motrin out, and keep proceeding with that. So that's been fun times. About to go on vacation here for the next couple weeks leading through my birthday, and ready to enjoy the true summer and get some sun-kissed freckles and deliciousness and all that good stuff.
Speaking of your birthday, it feels like you're getting old on me. You're just falling apart left and right. You're getting sick. You're getting pinched nerves in your neck. You're injuring shit. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm just a piece of shit. I don't know. It's really been the rails have been falling off. I also got a Whoop today. Shout out PMT. You got a free
how's
first
that
month? Dude, I just got it today. So I got basically like a fake Apple Watch. I've always been very opposed to the Apple Watch movement. I don't know why, but I just kind of have. I got one for the franchise for her birthday. She loves it. But so I'm in a fitness competition for work and I needed something to help track and whatever. So I got this Wise watch, WYZE. It was only like $30. Had a 9-day battery life, and it gives me like my text notifications and everything. So it's actually pretty nice. I only charged it one time, and then I noticed that the heart rate on it was like, I don't know. I'd be on the stair stepper, I'm grabbing the handles, and it says I'm at 130, and then the watch says I'm at like 90. I was like, all right, well, this thing sucks. So I got a Whoop watch, which tracks your sleep. And it's just this little band. It's not even a watch, actually. It's just like a fitness band, and it's really comfortable and lightweight, and it measures your sleep. It is interesting because it basically weighs your sleep to how much strain you put on your cardiovascular body and then your recovery therefore. So it kind of measures out which days are good days for you to go on a really long run where you run hard or weight lift really hard or do strenuous physical activity. And it kind of helps you, if you're an athlete, it helps you plan out which days you want to peak, or I think it says perform, or it says get by. So like some days, where you just need to have a busy day and you're not going to be exercising. So it helps you map out all that good stuff. It tracks your heart rate. It tracks your calories really accurately, apparently. And it tracks your RHV, which is the variance of how long your heart goes between beats, if I'm not mistaken. And that kind of is determined to use athletic cardiovascular health and all that good stuff. And it's, like I said, it's really lightweight, really comfy, and I'm excited. Apparently, a lot of people said that it kind of made them stop drinking as much or drinking as much caffeine because they could tell that it essentially ruins your sleep. And this thing will be like, oh, you had coffee at 4 p.m. yesterday. Your sleep was a 27 out of 100. And you're like, oh. So a couple people have told me how they've kind of stopped drinking as much, and it's been really good for them, and they feel really healthy and happy. So I'm really excited. It has a 5-day battery life. The most interesting part I think about it maybe is that the battery pack on it, like you charge the battery pack and then put the battery pack on the watch as opposed to taking it off and charging it. So pretty much like stays on your wrist for your life, which is a little weird, but I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, they actually have sponsored 2 of my favorite podcasts. Shout out No Laying Up and Circling Back, and they've been talking about that kind of stuff for a while. And it's interesting because partnered with the PGA Tour, and I don't know if they did this before or after this happened, but this was like peak COVID times, like peak COVID, but sports were just starting to come back. PGA Tour player by the name of Nick Watney had one, and he was the first guy to test positive for COVID on the tour, like after they had reopened up, and it was this whole big thing. But like he discovered it because his whoop like detected like his HRV or whatever was like off. So he like went to go get a test and was like, yeah, you have COVID.
Yeah, it has a COVID monitoring little system in it as well. And there's like communities you can join and groups you can join, kind of like Nike Run Club a little bit. And I read this whole thing. Patrick Mahomes has it, and how he would plan himself to peak on Sundays, and like the amount of strain that he would put on his body on a Sunday was like absolutely insane. It was like 20 is very high, like really, really, really high. And he would have like a 22 on Sundays, and it helped him map out his recovery and things a little bit better. So I've always been like a shitty sleeper, and I think that's why I have this messed up nerve now in my neck, because I just woke up on Sunday, and as you said, I'm old as dirt. So I slept wrong, woke up, and it hurts to turn my head. So that's where we're at. But this whoop is going to think I'm a piece of shit. I did not exercise today. Probably not going to exercise tomorrow. So it's going to be like, all right, well, you're just a loser, man.
Unfortunate. But hey, listen, I believe that you'll get back on the horse and you're going to be better than ever before with the help of Whoop, which
I did get into a steam room and a sauna for the first time in at least since before COVID. And oh my God, it felt incredible.
I could imagine. I haven't done one of those in a while. I low-key kind of did one today when I fired up the shower after my run. Just kind of let it run for a little while. I'm not sure.
Sat there.
Yeah, I think I was brushing my teeth or something, and it started to really fog up. So it's always nice to do that. But yeah, I guess that's enough Whoop talk. Sponsor the fucking pod if you want any more minutes here, Whoop. We're just completely giving you a total commercial here. But other than that, we got a pretty good episode for you guys here today. We got a little with Jonah Shafer of the Baltimore Sun. Runs well over an hour. I think it's going to be like an hour and 10, hour and 15 type thing. Got really deep into a ton of stuff with him on OTAs, minicamp, all that he's been seeing. It was a really fun chat.
Yeah, for sure. I was happy to hear, Dalen Hayes is someone that looks like they are capable of playing this Ravens defense. And he hit all, we went down the whole run list of Bozeman, the receivers, everything in between, DBs and what this offseason is going to look like. So it was a lot of fun. Great talk with him. He killed it. He ran through everything and really gave us a full episode. So that's what we got for you guys today.
Definitely. It had been a while since we had him on. I think we got into this. I had him on like in the combine in 2020, right before COVID went off. So it was good to get him back on for the first time in a good long while. He had plenty to say, and yeah, he was great. He's one of my low-key favorite like media personalities for the Ravens. I think for the
for sure. He's part of the meme culture. Like him and Daniel both are relatively younger guys, so they always shout out and fire off some fun little quips and weird things from social media.
Yeah, exactly. He brings, I think, kind of the film, analysis sensibilities that somebody like you has, but then he's on Instagram and he's like checking out the players' stories and stuff like that and keeping us into all that. And he's just a generally funny, pleasant guy. So it was a really good chat with him. And yeah, I guess we don't really have a ton for you guys on the other fronts. There wasn't a ton of news. So Jimmy Smith wants to be a Raven for life. That's pretty cool. We don't really have a ton on that other than that's cool. Lamar Jackson is his own agent. I think we kind of already knew that. We get into that a little bit with Jonas. He, I think, gave some really good analysis on like why that is interesting in the way that like there's no buffer between him and the organization in these negotiations.
That's something that we didn't talk about for sure.
Yeah, it's a really good point by him. So I guess just stay tuned for that. We get into plenty of all the news stuff, so we don't have to belabor on that too much. We'll get into that in the chat. But I guess before we get out of here, been making a point of reading the reviews. We got a new one that I thought was really especially great and heartwarming. Description is, or I guess the title.
Jonas just followed me back on Twitter. I've been following him for like a year and a half. He waited until he came on the show with me to follow me back.
He followed the podcast account. I think back when we first made contact with him a couple years ago. He just followed me too, right before the interview. So if you're listening,
that's funny.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you for diving deep into that at long last. But yeah, so getting into the reviews for the week, we got one from YAAHHH, 4 exclamation points from Friday. Really liked it. 2 stars. Description says clean. That's incorrect. While content is okay, the foul language F-bombs make this unsuitable for kids and unlistenable to me. So thanks a ton, I really appreciate all the support for the show. And I mean, if we can get you a free t-shirt or anything, just go ahead and reach out to me on Twitter at Jake Luke, and I'll definitely be hooking you up.
Hook him up.
Anything else?
No, I think either I lagged or you lagged for a second, but that's all I got. Yeah, Lamar. I was happy we talked about that because again, like Ravens are about to commit their future to Lamar, and it's just like no one's talking about it. So I'm glad we got into that with Jonas a little bit towards the end. But it was a great interview. It's about an hour and some change there. So we hope you guys enjoy. And Forgotten Dynasty has what, 2 episodes left?
Yep, 2 more to go. You got episode 5 coming out on Monday, and I'm putting the finishing touches on episode 6. So yeah, it's been a good run with that. Hope you guys are really enjoying it. I've had a lot of people reach out both publicly and privately to thank me for the work on it and all the compliments and stuff, which has been really great to kind of have some affirmations on it. And it's also great seeing people that are kind of coming to me now and saying like, I'm going to binge it on like X drive down to the south. Like I'm going to save it up for a couple flights or something like that. I think it is a really good bingeable series. So now that it's kind of getting into the meat of it, where episode 4 came out, that was probably my favorite episode so far. I think it might be a good spot to jump in. So if you haven't given it a shot yet, go back and listen to the episodes labeled Forgotten Dynasty, starting with 1, and make your way up to where we're at right now, which, like I said, number 5 coming out on Monday. So that's been a ton of fun. Thanks for bringing that up. I almost forgot.
Absolutely. And like we said, we don't have a ton for you guys right now. So glad to have this interview and Forgotten Dynasty taking us kind of right before training camp. We'll probably have Vaz hop on, as is tradition now, to do and maybe Kyle as well, to do a big training camp preview. And that's where we'll start to hunker down. And that's going to take us into some preseason games and some good stuff like that. So we're chilling right now a little bit, and we are happy to have this interview and Forgotten Dynasty carrying us up until training camp. And we'll be getting geared up. So hope you guys are vaxxed and waxed and staying safe and out and having fun in the sun and enjoying this summer, because we didn't have much of one last year. So go get after it, get some sun on your skin, get healthy, get fit, and stay good.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I guess that's that. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Keep leaving those great heartwarming reviews like the one we just got. Follow us on Twitter. You can follow the show at Podcast Beatdown. You can find me at Jake Luke. That is Louque. Spencer is at Ravens 4 Dummies. That's the number 4 in the middle.
Suns and 4.
Sons and 4. You're not that guy, pal. Okay, trust me. You're not that guy. That's going to go on the soundboard. But yeah, appreciate you guys. Follow us at Be More Beatdown on the main account, where we're tweeting out all our great articles from our tremendous authors that we have on offer. Have yourselves a great weekend. Like he said, enjoy yourself, get out in the sun, enjoy your summer, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
See ya.
Peace out. All right, we now welcome on a very special guest. It's a friend of the show, a recurring guest. It's Jonah Shafer of the Baltimore Sun. We were just talking before we got going here that it has been quite some time, but it's good to have you make your return here a couple days after minicamp. Jonas, how's it going, man?
It's going good, guys. How about yourself?
Doing pretty well. So
no complaints over here.
So wanted to get you on for that reason. You were out at minicamp. You were out at OTAs a couple weeks prior to that. So you're in the mix out there. You're in the mix with the media. I don't totally know what the whole scene is like there with the media, with COVID and some of the restrictions still in place. We've had some contact with their PR department, and it sounds like things are still a little weird. So maybe if you want to touch on a little bit of that and like kind of what the last year and a half of the ebbs and flows of being on the Ravens beat has been like for you since we last talked, because a lot has happened.
Right. I mean, as you mentioned off camera, the minicamp was not the minicamp, the combine was the last vestige, I guess, of the pre-COVID NFL, because people were carrying on with their business like everything was normal. People were going out to bars, people were mingling with prospects like, the world's worst pandemic and a century wasn't about to hit. And then, fast forward to I guess, just the offseason last year was all virtual. I mean, we did a Zoom with Lamar. That was when he just kind of broke the news himself that he was going to be on the cover of Lamar. If you guys remember that, that was just, EA Sports to the punch by, I guess, like a month or two. And they didn't seem
to just like, by the way, hey guys, I'm going to be on Madden. All right. Yeah. And we're doing really good out here too.
Somebody like asked him, like, I don't know who it was, but whoever that's a true journalist with like ink under their fingernails. Cause they just like straight up asked him like, wait, is it you? And he was like, yeah. And he said, it was so funny. He's the best.
Yeah. And, last year we were out there at training camp. It's socially distanced. Everyone is wearing masks. we're obviously not allowed in the locker room. We don't know what the situation is going to be for that this year. For about the first, I guess, 2.5 months of the season, obviously, it's all Zoom. I'm actually traveling because I figured that, the expenses aren't going to be that much. You can see some stuff, you can gain some advantages that other people won't just by being there in the stadium. I think I was the only person in the Ravens media, and that includes their in-house people, who was actually on the road. And then that holiday wave of COVID hits, and it's not looking all too good for the Ravens in terms of them actually, making the playoffs. And obviously, I don't need to tell you guys that there's more interest in the team when they're winning. So I was just like, you know what? Everyone else at the Sun and ESPN and the Athletic has been able to carry on without being in person at these games. Might as well, join the party. So even when they do make it to the playoffs, we're kicking it in at home. Watching the Tennessee game, the Buffalo game from home, and sure, you probably lost some stuff by not being able to see Lamar and how he was doing, kind of sprawled out on the field after he got hit. But for the most part, it was pretty manageable. I mean, obviously there was this kind of pack mentality that was inescapable because you don't have the option of bringing a guy aside in the locker room and talking to him. You could try to do some stuff outside the locker room just by trying to find interesting angles, but a lot of it was the stuff that you would read on ESPN, was the stuff that you would read on the Sun, was the stuff that you would read on BaltimoreRavens.com, and that was just a reality of the fact that you only were talking to 2 or 3 guys a day, and if a guy said a juicy thing, you weren't going to do the irresponsible thing and not jump on it. So it's been interesting. It's been challenging to try to find interesting stuff that other people don't want to write. But that's, I guess, what separates the kind of good storytellers from the average ones.
Right. It felt like you did a lot of deep dives into the history of draft picks and guys, getting in touch with their high school coaches and people from their college program, and tried to go for that aspect. So that was enjoyable to read, definitely from a different standpoint. But with practices, you guys got able to get back out to the facility for minicamp and OTAs and all that good stuff. That was your first time back in a while? And what was it like finally getting back and being on that side of things again to some return to normalcy?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest, kind of milestone in that return to normalcy is just the fact that the Ravens, and I imagine this is an NFL policy, but the Ravens said that if you were vaccinated and you had proof of that vaccination, just flash your card and you can get in without wearing a mask. So that's been great, just to not have that another encumbrance, in this 90-degree weather when you're out there, is just to be able to breathe freely. But obviously, the frustrating aspect of this, and I think this is, again, an NFL thing, if you have been to the facility, that just kind of right around the corner from one of the fields is that little terrace where they have all the interviews that they stream up on BaltimoreRavens.com. And practice ends and we can't go there. We have to go inside. Fortunately, we're allowed back into the media workroom, or some people go into their cars because they don't want to go into the media workroom. But there's just like that glimmering far off hope that one day we could be 10 feet, 15 feet away from these guys up at the podium and not have to do the weird, awkward Zoom dance where, we're being called on by the Ravens PR. We can just talk to these guys in person, even if we can't actually get, close enough to shake their hands. So it's been nice. Obviously, the NFL announcing, I guess, last week that there is going to be a more normal process of us being able to talk to guys in person, even if we might not be allowed in the locker room, was a step forward. But I think for the most part, it's just on the guys on the team to get their shit in order. I mean, excuse my language, and get vaccinated so that, we're all in a position where basically there is no fear of COVID getting spread, because it seems like for the most part, everyone in the media session is on board with having their vaccine.
Yeah, and I hope you guys do eventually get back to a point, and I guess even us too at some point, because we have been in discussions on media passes and stuff. We've been out there before, but kind of back to that point of the in-person press conference, it's been a little weird. It's not like your guys' fault or anything, even with this Zoom stuff, but like you watch some of them and you get like Jerry Coleman like talking about his like side effect to the vaccine reaction and stuff like that. He's just like hijacking it. Like it's kind of funny to watch like the technical stuff. Like you get this really buttoned up, like really high class organization that's like kind of being reduced to just like a whatever regular office setting is like having to use Zoom. I just think that's kind of a funny dynamic there. But as far as the way the practices are working, and you started getting back out there for OTAs, what would you say is kind of some of the first couple things that caught your eye that was different about being out there this year compared to years prior, in a football sense or otherwise?
Are you talking about just how practices are being run, or like how we in the media are interfacing with it all, or what? Like, are you looking for kind of Ravens tactical side of things?
I mean, whatever just jumps to mind. I mean, either.
Well, I mean,
how it's working.
Yeah, I mean, I did a feature on this, a couple weeks ago, but I would say that it's tough to go to practice and not hear, Keith Williams to just being kind of the line leader in a lot of senses. I mean, he's a guy who, if you go and look at his Twitter feed and all the videos he did when he was kind of freelancing in between the Nebraska job and what he's doing now with the Ravens, he's a very vocal guy. I mean, he develops a close relationship with these guys, and it's easy to see why, because he's always talking. One of the first memories I have of seeing him was just like, as the guys are going through a route running drill, just him yelling, run, 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 not like a drill sergeant, but just kind of adding that level of intensity to practice to get these guys to simulate what it's going to be like, come week one. So I think, we don't really know yet if the Ravens are going to have a league average receiving core, but I think their investment in the position, not just with draft picks, but with bringing in T. Martin, with bringing in Keith Williams, is definitely a good start. And I guess just kind of on an individual level, let's see. I mean, it's crazy just how big this offensive line is. It's to lose Orlando Brown and bring in Alejandro Villanueva, and as one of my coworkers said, to have Ronnie Stanley maybe be the lightest or the tall, the shortest guy,
the little brother of the squad at 6'5", 315, 320.
It's kind of wild. I mean, like, we're not close enough to talk to someone like Ben Cleveland, but if you are in the right place at the right time, you can see the vascularity on that dude's calves, and it is just like, holy shit. Like, I know.
How do you weigh that much and are ripped?
I know.
It's getting into some Johnny drama territory with the calf talk, but I like it.
Got some nice calves, bro.
He's just a big dude. So, I mean, it is the kind of offensive line that I think Greg Roman probably goes to sleep dreaming about. I mean, he's just a smash mouth dude, and this is a smash mouth offensive line. I guess you kind of it's always strange to me when you look at like the draft write-ups for centers, and you see a guy who's 6'3", and you see someone like describing them as not being ideal size for a center. And then you see like, oh yeah, someone could be Bradley Bozeman's size and potentially do a really, really good job and have, quote, ideal size because he is, 6'5", 300. So it is just a well-built, well-conditioned group. Obviously, we don't know how well they're going to, handle stunts and blitzes and twists and all that kind of stuff. But they certainly passed the eye test. And I think at this point in the season, that's really all you can say about them.
Bringing in a lot more veterans, and the Ravens kind of had to hide some of those smaller Matt Skura types over the years and some guys like that. So that's very good to hear, very interesting for sure. One of the hot topics that isn't always really on everyone's mind, you already touched on T. Martin, Keith Williams, is you were tweeting some videos of Rob Ryan running some drills, and being out of practice the limited amount of times that I have not seen anything like what Rob Ryan has been doing at those Ravens practices. And what is, one of the general senses that you get around all the new additions and what they'll be bringing to the team and guys like Rob Ryan and what he's been doing?
Well, we haven't gotten the chance to talk to a lot of the new coaches yet. Haven't talked to Rob Ryan, haven't talked to Keith Williams, haven't talked to some of the other guys. I think really the only first-year coach that we've got a chance to talk to was T. Martin.
Right.
So it's just been kind of looking on from afar. But, I mean, like Patrick Queen seems like he really loves, Rob Ryan. It's definitely a little bit of a changeover from what they had last year. But he's just a high-energy guy, always talking. It seems like he's already, best friends with Wake Martindale. And obviously those guys go way back. So those, are going to be probably thick as thieves just all season long. But it was interesting just to see them manipulate some of the drills and some of the tools that they have at their disposal to do some of the things that I was tweeting out. Like, I don't really know, if you can make a compelling argument that you should be spending a lot of time doing the kind of trap simulation that they were doing, just, getting ready and, changing positions at the last possible moment to take on a huge sled that's probably, I don't know, like 500 pounds of force. I mean, just a complete guesstimate on my end, but it is interesting because, someone like Patrick Queen could certainly use the help and just being able to take on those blocks and shed, some of these 300-pounders who are going to be coming at him. So I think for those guys, it's probably more of the mental processing that they need. But anything you can do at this point in the season is better than what they could do last season, which was nothing. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what those guys can do. But in terms of just those coaches who have stood out because of how big their personalities are, I think you have to put Rob Ryan and Keith Williams up at the top of those lists.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of funny because I think Rob and Rex, like, their reputations kind of precede themselves a little bit, and like they're kind of almost like these larger than life caricatures that you don't really think about, like the technical side of what they do well as a coach. So I thought that was a really good job by you to grab that clip and kind of put it out there because it provided a little bit more context, both visual and just in, a procedural side as to how they're running things. So kudos to you on that. But jumping into the players, this is one thing that you're going to know just as well as us. It's, everyone wants to hear about these new additions first and foremost. So starting out with the rookies, who's a rookie that's been as good or better than advertised to you? And then maybe a rookie that you're hoping to see more from when training camp opens up.
I think just in terms of meeting and surpassing expectations, it's probably Dalen Hayes, just because to be honest, when they drafted him and I looked at his NFL.com write-up, I was like, I guess it makes sense. Like, he didn't have huge sack production at Notre Dame, injury history, but he comes in rookie minicamp and he's just kicking guys' asses. And he gets to OTAs and he gets to minicamp, and it's obviously not as dominant, but he still puts in a couple of good pass rush reps every few plays. And I mean, it's tough for me to say that a guy like him was better than Odafe Oweh because, I mean, if you guys are out of these practices, Wink Martindale does not give a F about, protecting the mental health of these quarterbacks. He's sending 5-6 guys every single play. He wants to get these.
He wants to end reps. He wants reps to get shut down.
Yeah, he cares more about having his defense prepare for what they're going to do in 2021 than what Lamar or Trace or Tyler might face in 21. I mean, that's just the kind of coach that he is. So, whether a guy gets home or not, it's tough to tell whether it was his, responsibility doing the right thing or just the offense screwed up and that guy was a free runner. But still, I think Hayes had a couple really impressive reps. Odafe Oweh, he just stands out in drills because of how big and strong he is. Interested in just kind of seeing how he does with being more explosive on that snap, because that was some kind of concern that I had just looking at his reps from last year. And then on the offensive side, I mean, we didn't get a whole lot of looks at Rashad Bateman, but he is just a smooth route runner. And I mean, to kind of match up what you see in these workouts that he posts on Instagram and stuff like that with what he actually can do on the field and where he can line up, it's really, really impressive. So I don't know exactly where his best position is going to be in 2021. He was so good as an outside receiver at Minnesota 2 years ago, but maybe that's where the Ravens see Hollywood being better for this coming year. But I think he can run any kind of route in the book and he can line up everywhere. So it'll be interesting. And I'm really curious to see more of what we saw from him this year, because it was disappointing that he had, there was the muscle injury or the muscle soreness one day. And then there was the illness the second day of minicamp or the first day of minicamp. So I'm really excited to see just what he looks like come training camp, because it might be a situation where, he's just the most dominant receiver on the field some days. And that's a really exciting thought for the Ravens, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And as far as the free agents, obviously we, aren't able to get a great look at Zeitler or Villanueva all the way, but you can see them working through drills and kind of their confidence. Then, of course, Sammy Watkins has been tearing it up, as you have written about and everything. So what have been your thoughts on him, and what do you see from some of these other free agents, these veteran additions, aside from the rookies?
Yeah, I think Villanueva's been impressive just by the fact that he hasn't looked out of place. I mean, I think if he comes in and we aren't talking about the fact that he's played 5 left tackle snaps since 2015. That is going to be a huge win for the Ravens, because to hear someone like Penei Sewell, who is in his athletic prime, you would think would be able to kind of handle any changes to his environment. Like as at any point in his career, basically say like, oh yeah, moving from this side of the offense to the other side of the offense is a huge inconvenience, going to be a huge challenge. Like I would imagine that it's going to be at least 2 times harder for someone like Villanueva, who is not in his athletic prime and who has been doing this for so long on the left side. But to his credit, he didn't really look like he had 2 left feet out there. So I asked Bradley Bozeman about him on minicamp, and he just kind of gave a general pat answer, which was a little disappointing because, maybe it didn't really seem like he was that engaged with the question. But I think, Villanueva obviously comes with that military background of there is no challenge that's too big for me. Obviously, every NFL player has that kind of mentality, but I think it's a good sign that we aren't talking about, man, what a disaster, Villanueva is going to be this year. So if he can be a guy who can just, be a solid force, I think, having Lamar Jackson as quarterback does a lot, so much for these tackles, because basically, who's going to dare speed rush against Lamar Jackson and open up that hole?
Especially on that side.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. But with Sammy Watkins, to be honest, he did not have a great start. He skipped that first week of OTAs. I remember seeing on Instagram that day of open practice that he had posted some story from like a golf range or something. So I was like, oh God, what have the Ravens gotten themselves into? But then he shows up for that second week of OTAs. He drops a couple passes, but he starts to, find a groove. The next week he's catching just a couple fastballs from Lamar, who's a guy who's, he's probably not caught a whole lot of passes in his career up to that point from. And then, fast forward to minicamp. And even though Lamar had a couple picks that first day, it was Sammy Watkins coming down with the big catches downfield. And you get to that second day, first play of 11-on-11s, he's, running a go route down the left sideline. He catches it over Marlon Humphrey for I think a 65-yard touchdown or whatever it would have been. I think 3 plays later, he catches the exact same kind of play. I think I had him catching, 4 or 5 passes, and all but one of them would have been a 15 or 20 plus yard catch. So, I think it was pretty telling that when Lamar was asked about Sammy, he of course mentioned his size and just the catch radius, but he had kind of catch himself from saying that Sammy was as fast as Hollywood Brown, because who's as fast as Hollywood Brown. But I thought it was telling that his play speed is such that he basically had to deliberate for a half second. Well, might he be as fast as Hollywood Brown? And obviously he's not. But I thought it was pretty telling that he moved so well out there that he was kind of raising those questions just by how well they played.
Yeah, the Sammy Watkins, total non sequitur, but the Sammy Watkins anecdote that just lives rent free in my head is when he said that he gets hurt a lot because he practices too hard, which just reminds me of the Michael Scott, I work too hard, I care too much, and I sometimes get too invested in my job. But yeah, that's he's a funny character. If you follow him on Twitter, which I'm sure you do, he's got some funny interactions on there. But I mean, looking at the wide receiver position just in general, I think one of the really interesting camp battles is kind of that lower half of the wide receiver depth chart. You got guys like Duvernay, Boykin, a lot of those guys. So if the season were to start tomorrow, which of those guys fighting for a spot in that position do you think would be on the team?
Man, it's tough to say. I know some reporters are kind of prickly about saying which guys are on the first team or second team. I'm not really, because first of all, it's friggin' minicamp, and also I don't think there's anything tactical by saying
they're rotating reps. It's
I know they are.
They're out.
Exactly. So first day of minicamp, it was Hollywood on the outside, Watkins on the other side. And it was Prochet, starting inside. I think that might have been the day. Again, my day's confused, but one of them, obviously, Bateman was not. But I think they're mainly training him as an outside receiver, at least for that portion of camp. So that was pretty telling to me that Prochet was that high in their estimation, or for that day of wanting to see how things work, that he was their top guy as a slot receiver. So that was kind of that was pretty eye opening. But man, there are just so many guys that they've invested so much in. And are you going to keep a guy like Prochet, who probably at this point is not the favorite to be either the punt returner or the kick returner. And let's say, Bateman becomes their top slot guy. Is he going to jump someone like Duvernay for an outright roster spot? Probably not. Is Miles Boykin for, as much as he, can kind of be disappointing, is he going to lose a roster spot with everything he contributes? Not only as a blocker, potentially special teams. They don't really have a lot of just big, tall dudes who could be red zone threats. We saw him kind of use that frame as a red zone target for Lamar last season. So
they seem to really like Boykin on punt return as a rusher as well, too. He's got a ton of reps there over the last 2 years.
Right, and you can kind of make the same argument for why someone like Justice Hill is kind of, I think at this point, more of a sure thing to make the roster than to be on the bubble, because the great Edgar Allen on his YouTube account put up like a 6-minute video maybe a week or two ago, just basically showing everything that Justice Hill does well as a gunner, which is a heck of a whole lot. So I mean, I don't really know. I guess I think the safe money is on the Ravens keeping 6 receivers at this point. So you have Hollywood, you have Watkins, you have Bateman, you have Duvernay, you have, I guess, let's say Boykin. And then, I guess it's Wallace, but that means Prochet doesn't make the team. That cuts out.
It wouldn't be shame. We also, an IR and a little IR stash and some links and some nods and some magic wouldn't be out of the question, but it's just so damn tough.
But that totally, discounts the possibility of someone like, Jalen Moore, who was really impressive in camp or in minicamp, or Benjamin Victor, who, everyone was talking about after that second day, but really hadn't done a whole lot, at least in my appraisal before that. So it's going to be tough. I mean, I just don't see the Ravens, if they keep like 3 quarterbacks on the roster, I don't think you can keep 7 wide receivers on that initial 53. So it's tough, man. I mean, like, I would hate to see them stash someone like Prochet, but that just might be what they have to do to make the roster math work. But either way, I mean, I think they're going to feel much better about that group of guys than they did last year when we were talking about, is Chris Moore going to make the 53?
Another hot topic on that side of the ball, obviously the line, and it's Bradley Bozeman's transition to center, and the center position we had kind of alluded to earlier. You've had guys like Macari, Skura, Tristan Colon-Castillo, and of those 3, I mean, maybe TCC is the biggest guy, but those were finesse, tinier guys that could move really well. And now Bozeman, as you mentioned previously, bringing that ideal center size, is one of the bigger-ish probably centers in the league starting week 1. Do you feel that he's just jovial about that position and he anticipated playing in the NFL at center more so, and he's just ready to get back to it? Or what are the vibes you're getting overall from how the way the team has talked about it and he's spoken about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the quote that I probably use the most, just in describing him, and thankful to John Harbaugh for saying it, was just, he looks really natural out there. And I think you're going to see that quote, recirculate a lot all the way up until the start of training camp, because that's what the Ravens need. They can't at this point in the offensive line's development settle for someone who looks like a work in progress. I mean, Matt Skura was obviously a center naturally, but by trade. Patrick Macari was someone who had played left tackle left and right tackle, I think, at Cal, and they kind of forced him in to do that, and they saw the consequences of moving him inside. So, Bozeman's the guy who obviously played at that center position at Alabama, did a great job at I think he only played guard sparingly, in high school and through college. So the best thing that you could say about his offseason work was that there weren't a whole lot of ducks out there, just in terms of snaps. I mean, he did a really good job of getting it out on time to Lamar. No real nightmare reprisals that we saw from Buffalo. So he did, I think, everything that was asked of him. I mean, there were a handful of pre-snap penalties. I can say that, but it was tough to assign blame, whether it was him holding on to the ball too long or other guys just, not knowing the snap count the right kind of way. So I'm sure they'll get that all cleared up. I mean, he's just a guy with football intelligence pouring out of every, ounce of him. That was the I think for all of the things that you could hold against him coming out of the draft or coming to the NFL out of the draft, him not having the football mind that you need to process things and to line things up pre-snap, I think that's always been a strength of his. So I think the Ravens have they can feel pretty confident in where he is. I don't think John Harbaugh would have come out and said, this is our starting center as early in camp as they did without being pretty confident in where things were. So I think they must feel pretty good about where things stand. Obviously, all it takes is a couple bad snaps for people to raise hackles and say, is this really the guy that we want? But at this point in the process, who else are you going to go to? He's clearly their best option, and has that experience in the system, which I think can't be discounted. And I don't think there's any kind of controversy possible honestly at this point, and when how close we are to the start of the season.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And another position that kind of seems set as well, maybe a little bit of uncertainty, is tight end. You got the health of Boyle kind of in question a little bit. We'll see how he looks. But kind of curious about the guys because, Boyle and Andrews, that's 1 and 2 interchangeably. And I'm not sure how much you've gotten to see yet of Josh Oliver or Ben Mason, but they seem like really different players that are ostensibly going to be playing the same position. They drafted Mason, who was a fullback, immediately listed him at tight end. If you've seen any of those guys, how would you kind of compare and contrast their playing styles? Because it seems like kind of night and day.
Yeah, Oliver he had a bunch of first-team reps during minicamp, which I think, it kind of tells you where he is in the pecking order. Obviously, if Ricard were healthy, that might not have been the case. If Boyle were healthy, that definitely would have been the case. But those guys are still working their way back. And, obviously Boyle with how he plays and just the force that he exerts every time he tries to take out a guy on those knees, I'm hoping that he can, withstand the full 17-game season. But I think of the guys who are fighting for that third tight end spot, if we're not including Mason, just for the sake of this hypothetical, I think Oliver's probably the guy, the leader in the clubhouse right now. Made a bunch of good grabs. Seems more polished than someone like Eli Wolf. He's obviously been more available than Jake Breland, who, God help him, just cannot see the field. And it's kind of been frustrating because I remember during the pre-draft process last year, there were clips of him working out and doing kind of combine drills. But fast forward, I guess basically a year, we're still not at the point where he's been cleared to even go out and practice, which is a disappointment after, everything he put on tape at Oregon. So hoping that he can be out there and maybe, add a nice little element to the mix there. But, so I think, Oliver, he's maybe not the kind of third round fringe star potential, like Jacksonville maybe imagined when I drafted him, but he probably looks better than Tim Tebow, which is at this point I think a safe comparison. He's an athletic guy, big frame. We don't really know yet how good a blocker he is, which I think is going to be a huge factor for Greg Roman when he's helping to devise what the depth chart might look like. There's just not a whole lot of run blocking, honestly, during these offseason workouts, and that's where someone like Eric Tomlinson can really shine. And to kind of pivot to the second part of the question, it's also where someone like Ben Mason can really shine, because that was his bread and butter at Michigan, just lining up in that I formation a lot of times at Michigan and just taking out the Minnesota linebackers and the Penn State linebackers of the world. I think it was Jeff Strebeck who asked John Harbaugh, basically if he expects the environment of training camp to be more kind of conducive to letting Ben Mason do Ben Mason things. And I think John Harbaugh said, yeah, it is, because, he's kind of frankly looked a little bit stiff as a receiver at times. I think he's had a couple of drops. But what did he have at Michigan? Like 3 receptions over 4 years. I don't think that's a death sentence for him and his roster chances. Obviously, Pat Ricard went from being, who he was in college to a guy who could, be a reliable enough receiver out of the flat for Lamar Jackson. So, and I think Ben Mason is probably more athletic than Pat Ricard in terms of just getting out in space and maybe making people miss. So I don't really know yet how to kind of handicap what his roster chances might be, because are you talking about having 3 tight ends and 2 fullbacks for this roster? I mean, it's certainly a unique roster, but Greg Roman has also made a point to say that it's like that the Ravens, even though they had a lot more runs than they did passes last year, they still were technically a pass first team just by the amount of dropbacks that they had. So it's tough to kind of just make sense of all the dissonance between this is what they've done well, this is what they want to do well, but this is who they drafted. So I just don't know. I mean, Mason might be a guy that they, as you said, Spencer, just kind of stashed, and, maybe Pat Ricard has an injury in week 4 and you need a fullback to kind of take over that mantle. But
it's a really interesting position to me because I feel like Oliver particularly is the only one who could somewhat replicate what Mark Andrews does on a football field out of every single tight end of the 57,000 that they have right now. So it feels like that might be something that is very, very intriguing for the Ravens at the cost of that 7th round pick. So I think that's an interesting situation considering depth and what Andrews does for this team.
I mean, Eli Wolf can get vertical, but and then everyone, including me, made like a big deal about the kind of times that he put up at his pro day, which were hand timed, which we should point out. But he just doesn't have the refinement that we've seen from Oliver so far. Breeland, if he's healthy, could be that guy, but I think it's too far, a long shot at this point. So you're right. I mean, I think Oliver is so attractive in terms of like making these 53-man roster projections just because of that exact reason of who else in the middle of the field is going to be an attractive target for Lamar Jackson. And that is Lamar Jackson's sweet spot. At this point in his career, he wants and needs people to throw to over the middle. And Josh Oliver could be that, even though he also made a handful of good receptions, outside the numbers in minicamp. So at this point, unless he's just totally overwhelmed by the prospect of blocking dudes, I think he's, pretty clearly the favorite right now to be that, 3rd tight end.
Right. And closing it out on offense, there's a few different storylines to track with quarterback. So what's your general take on where the Ravens are at quarterback wise? And I think people kind of also undervalue how important it is to have good scout team quarterbacks and quarterbacks that are playing up to a level of competition that can make everybody better.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. It reminds me of a story I wrote, I think 2 years ago on RG3. This was getting toward the point in the season where I think it was before the Week 17 game against Pittsburgh where he was finally given a start because there was really nothing to play for. And the great thing about having RG3 was that he had the skill set not only athletically but also intellectually where he could basically be any quarterback you want him to during the course of a scout week. He could be Tom Brady one week. He could be Kyler Murray the next week. Could be Baker Mayfield the week after that. And that, I think, is just so important for getting the defense primed and ready to play whoever they were going to face that week. When you have someone like, when you basically have a dual threat quarterback, I think you have, a broader spectrum of guys that you could emulate because you're not going to ask, you couldn't ask Joe Flacco, let's say if he was still in Baltimore, to pretend to be Kyler Murray. I mean, that's just totally out of their own possibility. And you're not going to have one of your wide receivers kind of do the Lamar Jackson emulation thing and try to throw the ball. So I don't really know who between Tyler Huntley and Trace Sorley might be best served to be that guy that the scout team asks to pretend to be the quarterback. So all I can really say is like both of those guys had their moments in minicamp. I think just in terms of like potential, I would probably give the edge to Tyler Huntley. He has a stronger arm. He also has a bit of a longer windup, which might be a problem just in terms of getting the ball out quickly, but I think he's a better runner in the open field. He looks more decisive in the open field. He has that chemistry with the South Florida guys as a South Florida guy himself. So I would give the edge to him, especially now that Trace McSorley and those dreams of him being a Taysom Hill type guy on special teams have been completely decimated by the realities of what it takes to be a Taysom Hill type player.
About 25 pounds of freaking rock solid muscle away.
Yeah. I mean, Trace McSorley, seeing him in the locker room 2 years ago, he's not really a muscle down guy. He's a heck of a player. He killed Maryland when he was at Penn State, but he does not look like the kind of guy you would expect to see on a special teams unit. So I'm curious to see just where those two guys go with the backup competition. It seemed like maybe out of seniority, they were giving Trace the kind of QB2 reps at this point, which I totally get and makes sense. But the Ravens coaches at this point, I think, would have a tough time deciding between those two guys. And it might be, a total wash, because it might be that they take 3 quarterbacks on the 53-man roster. That's been the kind of MO for John Harbaugh these past couple of years. Yeah, I think at this point it'd probably be like 60-40 odds for Tyler Huntley, and that's just my appraisal of it, not knowing, how well each guy's mastered the playbook or anything like that. But I think in terms of emulating Lamar Jackson and what the responsibilities are in that offense, Huntley doesn't matter.
Definitely. And switching over to the defense, like there still seems to be, even after the draft, a lot of worry going around about the pass rush, maybe not having enough juice. Justin Houston is a name that was thrown around a lot before the draft, maybe even a little bit still is. From what you've seen, is that still kind of a concern in your book? And how is Odafe, who kind of figures in as a starter immediately, how is he kind of looking to maybe mitigate those concerns?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually, just before I got on with you guys, I was kind of doing just basically the Ravens position groups ranked by worry. And I think I had the outside linebacker group as the most worrisome. Not to say that it is an all-concerning fear, like, quarterback might be with some other teams. But, if you go down that depth chart, you're talking about Tyus Bowser, a guy who's more acclaimed for his coverage skills and for his pass rushing ability. Pernell McPhee, a great run stopper, but getting up there in age and doesn't really have a whole lot in his bag pass rush-wise. Jalen Ferguson, we're still waiting to see the evolution of Sack Daddy. And then Dalen Hayes and Owe. I mean, I don't think it's fair to expect, Hayes to come in and play more than like 25 or 30% of the snaps. And with Owe, even though he had all these great marks from PFF last year as a run stopper, I don't know yet whether he's going to come in and do enough to unseat, Pernell McPhee week 1. It's kind of interesting because McPhee definitely got the bulk of the reps with the first team defense in minicamp. But if you go back a couple of weeks earlier from, I think, what Eric DeCosta said in the Ravens.com interview with Ryan Mankin and Garrett Downing, he was talking about Owe like he did kind of expect him to be a starter week 1 just because of what he could offer as a run defender. And he's great at that. No shade in that direction. He's a big, strong guy who can lock out really well. But, are you going to throw him to the Wolves week 1 if he's a guy who just doesn't have a pass rush plan to win against these really seasoned, experienced, strong left tackles? Can he kind of master the footwork of stunts and twists and that kind of thing better than Pernell McPhee when you're talking about him teaming up with, Matabike and Campbell and guys like that. So he did not blow me away in minicamp, but like I said earlier, it's really tough to come away with wow impressions from edge rushers because of just how often, Wink Martindale is setting the cavalry after these quarterbacks. I mean, it's not a situation where guys are just tearing off the edge because, for one, they're not allowed to hit the quarterbacks. And number 2, a lot of times, in these 7-on-7 situations, they're not in there at all, or it might be an 11-11. And it's just very, very chill, pass rush because it's a situational thing where it's
going through the motions and more so than,
exactly.
trying to really hurt guys and get after it.
So, I mean, could they use someone like Houston? Absolutely. But obviously the word is that he's asking for more money than what the Ravens are, willing to spend. And, maybe they'll kind of come to a happy place where all parties are content. But it's just tough to say because so much of it is projection and just taking the coaches at their word that someone like Jalen Ferguson is going to make that leap, or someone like Odafe Owe can do more than just one thing as a pass rusher, or Tyus Bowser could be more than just the best coverage outside linebacker in the NFL. So if I were a Ravens fan, if the season were starting tomorrow, I'd be worried. but a lot could happen in the next couple of months.
Absolutely. And as far as the young linebackers are going, Patrick Queen has really turned into this kind of polarizing figure on the Ravens. And, he's had a lot of splash plays, a lot of errors on his part that he was very vocal about as well with the media. And one of my favorite clips about Patrick Queen is Joe Ortiz saying last year, where he said, Patrick is a guy where we anticipate he would have been a top 10 pick next year, and basically just got a year in the NFL instead of another year at LSU. And then there's also Malik Harrison, who feels like a rock solid sort of safe, conservative, good inside linebacker. There's a lot of people who are higher on Malik Harrison and his potential. So what's your take on how those two guys have looked, maybe even more so confidence-wise than anything else?
Yeah, I don't think Patrick Queen's ever lacked confidence, at least in terms of, his public persona, if that makes sense. I mean, obviously you could look at the tape and say, why is he, being hesitant there? The one thing I will say, Spencer, that now that you bring up Joe Ortiz, is I think at one point when they had the Ravens, the kind of like powwow where they just basically break down film of their guys to explain why they drafted them. At one point, Joe Ortiz was, I think, going through Odafe Owe's tape, and there was like a good rep that he had, but that the Penn State inside linebacker behind him just totally whiffed on, taking on a guy who's like, and Ortiz, made some remarks to the effect of like, we would never draft a guy like that. And then you look at the Patrick Queen tape from last year, which I looked at a lot of just kind of incidentally when I was looking at what Justin Madubuike did so well last year. It's like, wow, there are a lot of plays where Joe Ortiz would not have drafted Patrick Queen based on the merits of that play. So I don't know, man. I mean, like, he's so athletically gifted and he makes so many splash plays that you could definitely see him emerging into a Devin White type weapon, which is, maybe what his projection would have been had he waited a year to come out and had splash plays at LSU that Devin White did a couple of years earlier. And granted, I did not watch enough Devin White tape to say that he was or wasn't an all-pro type player. So I could only basically evaluate him based on what PFF said and what the SAC said. If you go by the SACs, he was a total impact player. If you look at what PFF said, despite all that, Devin White was still kind of only an above average linebacker. So I don't know. I mean, like, I'm high on Patrick Queen, as I think you were, coming out of the draft, just because of everything he could do so well athletically. I think what we saw from him in coverage, especially just like one-on-one against linebackers, it was a small sample size, but it was disappointing. It was encouraging to me that he recognized and owned up to the fact that there were a lot of pass plays last year where he just did not do his job straight up.
Very simple mistakes he alluded to. Yeah. Very simple mistakes, just not sitting in your zone and staying there, things like that.
Right. So, I think a couple of months ago on Instagram, he was putting out clips of him working with a guy, I think down in New Orleans or Louisiana or somewhere near his hometown, of him just, working on his drops, being in the right place at the right time. And I think, him having a normal offseason to, just inhale the playbook, to inhale all the stuff that he did well, all the stuff he did poorly, should make a big difference for him because, for all the things that you can say about Patrick Queen, he seems like just a very naturally intelligent guy, great head on his shoulders, can run like the wind. I am curious to see what him going from like 240-ish pounds to 235 or wherever he says, how that is going to help him or hurt him maybe as a run defender, because, if you struggled as much as he did kind of taking on blocks, do you really want to be a little bit lighter in the pants? I probably wouldn't, but if he feels like it helps him get there a half step or a step quicker, and that makes all the difference, to get into that A gap or to get into that B gap, maybe that does make a difference, and maybe that does help him cut down on the amount of missed tackles that he had last year. So at one point I'm optimistic. At another point I look back at the film and I'm like, well, PFF wasn't all that wrong in kind of their evaluation of him.
He had a really rough game against the Patriots, and they went under center and ran a bunch of I, and he was just a little bit lost out there, and it kind of showed. But down the stretch, he was a lot more calm. It's just funny because everyone's always like, rookie linebacker, you got to play fast, He played way too fast.
Yeah, and I mean, in that New England game, it was also kind of exposing not only some of his limitations, but I think Malik Harrison's as well, because he was just so intent on firing upfield and stopping Damian Harris and stopping Cam Newton that he just left acres of space behind him for play action. And, the great guys on Ravens Twitter, Yoshi, I forget the last couple of digits in his handle, but he, does a great job of charting. And I think he revealed that Malik Harrison basically almost never saw the field on third down. And, he was a guy who at Ohio State could be useful for getting after the pass rusher. But so far with the Ravens, we haven't really seen a whole lot of him being a guy who's flashed, that pressure ability, that ability to take down quarterbacks. So unless he can be a guy who you can trust to, be a third down linebacker in the rare situations where the Ravens are in base defense, having two inside linebackers on the field at the same time, it's pretty much just going to be the Patrick Queen show. I mean, he had 2.5, he had more than 2 times as many snaps as any inside linebacker on the team last year. And that was with LJ Ford. That was with, Chris Bohr. So, I mean, frankly, the position's fortunes are going to rise and fall with him, barring injury or barring someone else coming up and knocking him off. So, it's fair to talk about other guys in that group. And I'm excited to see what Chris Bohr could do after what we saw from him toward the end of last season. I'm excited to see what LJ Fort does. Not only with special teams, but, maybe becoming a more productive pass rusher. Excited to see what Malik Harrison does with a normal offseason under his booth, under his hat. But really, I mean, it just all kind of comes down to Patrick Queen at this point.
Absolutely. And that linebacking core, I wouldn't necessarily, but there is some promise, some potential there. At corner, it kind of feels like they're relatively set. I mean, like they come into it with 2 headlining guys. They have a lot of depth and kind of fringe guys. But as we've seen, I think even last season, we saw that a couple injuries can really quickly kind of shake that confidence in the position group. And have there been any down the depth chart cornerbacks kind of giving you confidence they'll be okay in a pinch? Like you have Tavon Young returning from injury for what feels like the 3rd year in a row. And we've got some of these young guys in the mix. They draft Shaun Wade. What have you kind of seen from the bottom of the corner depth chart?
Yeah, I didn't see a whole lot from Shaun Wade or from Brandon Stevens in the rare occasions when he might have lined up a cornerback. I think the guy who was most impressive just because of where we saw him was Khalil Dorsey. With Tavon Young out, it was fair to wonder who was going to step up and get those nickelback snaps, and it was Dorsey, and he acquitted himself really, really well, for being an undrafted guy. I think at Northern Arizona, he really showed his mettle. Even someone like Devontae Harris, I mean, completely kind of forgot about him when I was writing up this positional rankings thing, but he had first or second day of minicamp 2 or 3 pass breakups, just doing a great job of locating the ball, being in the right place at the right time, and just stopping completions against bigger receivers. And I think Next Gen Stats put out a stat that was a testament to his value. I think he was top 5 gunner speed, last year, which was really impressive to me. So it is a group that, for as high as the hopes were last year for them, obviously injuries, submarine, so many of those hopes. But if you're just talking about a group that should get better by the fact that Marcus Peters should be healthy, he's a guy who durability really hasn't been a concern over his entire career. If you're talking about Marlon Humphrey getting better by the virtue of the fact that he can go back from slot to outside, whereas his natural position, that just boom, you're talking about 5-10% better. Marlon Humphrey is already one of the NFL's best cornerbacks. Tavon Young, we don't know what he's going to be, but I can tell you that at training camp last year, I don't think anyone, handled Mark Andrews better than Tavon Young in those instances where those 2 guys were lining up. And I think he had a decent game against Cleveland in week 1. I think there might have been a couple situations where the Cleveland tight end just kind of jump balled him, and Tavon Young, there's only so much you can do as a 5'9", 180 pound guy. So, that's a great top 3. And Jimmy Smith, until that midseason injury, was one of PFF's top rated cornerbacks outside cornerback, great job. The Ravens asked him to match up against Travis Kelce in the Kansas City game. I think he did a pretty good job, all things considered. So, if you're talking about that top of the depth chart, and you haven't even talked about guys like Anthony Averett, who could, step in a pinch, Khalil Dorsey, Devontae Harris, Sean Wade. I mean, it's just a super deep group, and the guys who don't contribute on defense, you imagine, just have the physical ability to help out on special teams. So I think it's a group whose competition is only going to make those guys better. And knock on wood, assuming everyone stays healthy, I don't think there's a better position group, just a better group of cornerbacks rather in the NFL than what the Ravens have.
Definitely, maybe one of the strongest rooms of any team at any position in the NFL for sure.
Yeah.
And one of the players that I think has a introverted personality a little bit, but he provided the quote that I think it was maybe Mink drew out a little bit more, is Chuck Clark. And Chuck Clark made that awesome quote where he was asked about kind of Ardarius Washington, and he alluded to the fact that he had been watching the rookie camp tape. And then Mink was like, "Wait, what'd you say? You were watching the rookie camp tape?" And he was like, "Oh, well, yeah." So I think it's kind of gone a little bit less talked about. At one point, it was a really hot topic where Chuck Clark took over the mic a couple years ago. And since then, it feels like he really doesn't get a ton of buzz, but he is the real leader of that defense, and especially kind of looking at the back seven, if you look at it that way. So what do you see from him that tells you that's one, kind of the case or not, and where he's at right now? And it feels like he's just been quietly ascending as much as he's played.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can tell that the Ravens respect him, and that Ravens PR realizes his importance, because even though that was a great little memory there with what Ryan asked, he is one of the first defensive guys to go up at the podium and talk, because who else when Calais Campbell isn't there, which he wasn't for part of OTAs, is going to go out there and basically comport himself with the kind of leadership that Chuck Clark does. I mean, last year wasn't a huge one in terms of splash plays. I think him and Deshaun Elliott combined for one pick and 8 pass defenses, which isn't a whole lot, especially after what Earl Thomas did the year before. But Earl Thomas is in the NFL for a lot of reasons. So I think the Ravens, they like what they have, and Chuck Clark obviously wouldn't have given him that extension a couple of years ago if they didn't see him as being a guy, jack of all trades, who can line up in the box, basically act as a kind of de facto linebacker in some run stopping scenarios, but also be a center fielder, not with the kind of ideal range that you would kind of want for a 2021 safety, but could still get the job done, can match up on tight ends, can track running back coming out of the backfield. So everything that you would want a Ravens safety to do, I think he does it. Is he ever going to be a guy who makes the Pro Bowl? I would say probably not, unless he just has a kind of couple balls bounce his way and he ends up with 5 or 6 picks. But in terms of a guy who just outplays his contract and does everything that we in the media can't really grasp, who else would you want to have in that position besides Chuck Clark?
Absolutely. And the one thing I wanted to ask you that was a little more meta was, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is your 4th year covering the Ravens, Jonas?
This will be the 4th year, yeah.
4th year. Congratulations on that. You've been, I've read probably 85% of your articles over the years, and I've watched your football mind grow and where you're taking information from and the things that you have kind of focused on, and it's been a lot of fun. So what I wanted to ask you was, where do you feel the Ravens are confidence-wise as an organization in the AFC and going into this season, and where they are kind of looking back to 4 years ago is an interesting time, because it feels like the Ravens have maybe 10 players from when you started that are on their roster, maybe 15, something like that. There's been a massive turnover. And if you go back just a year prior to that, it's like the Ravens have had an entire rebuild quietly and had some winning seasons as well. So where do you think they stand right now in terms of being a true contender, as opposed to where it looks like they kind of were the last couple of years and kind of fizzled out and didn't really have the pieces? Do you think this is basically the year where they have it all together more so than before?
That's a good question. It's tough to kind of separate my feelings about what they could do from what they feel they can do. Because
Right.
to be honest, just kind of off the top of my head, I don't think they were asked a whole lot of big picture questions. I mean, John Harbaugh said on that last day of minicamp that he feels like they don't really have any areas of weakness. Not to say that like this team is complete, but it was in regards to I think Jameson's question about whether they might make any offseason additions like a Justin Houston, and he said he feels like they're pretty much set at every position. I think you could ask pretty much anyone in the NFL at that coach position, and they might kind of give the pat answer because this is a time for good vibes basically in the offseason. No one's gonna cop to feeling anything less than pretty good about their team. But I think they feel like they should be the AFC North favorites at this point. And if you can win the AFC North at this point, then you should feel pretty good about your chances of just against anyone, honestly. I mean, obviously, we won't have to wait long, just week 2 to see that kind of measuring stick game against Kansas City. If they can beat them, all bets are off in terms of the amount of hype that we're going to see on, Get Out the next day or on NFL Live the next day, because that has been the thorn in their sides. I don't need to tell Ravens fans that. But, it's interesting because they have a dynamic player at quarterback in Lamar, of course. But if you were to kind of just sort like the NFL's most important positions, it would probably be, tackle, and we don't know, how Ronnie Stanley's going to be. After that, you might go with edge rusher. We don't know if they have any proven playmakers. After that, you might go wide receiver, and do the Ravens have like a top 20, top 30 receiver in the league at this point? Probably not. And yet, because of how this offense has been arranged, because of the strength of the cornerback position, because of the strength of special teams, the consistency that they have on the coaching staff, it just feels like they do have so many pieces, and so many pieces that other teams just straight up don't have. I mean, like, what other team has a Justin Tucker? What other team has, an offense that threatens defenses in ways that the Ravens offense does with Greg Roman and that run game? What other teams have, I don't know, kind of return threat like Devin Duvernay? I mean, he might come back to earth in year 2, but to have a kind of game breaker who averaged like 30 yards of return was pretty absurd to do that.
Far and away, it's underrated how far and away consistently he was getting the ball to the 30 and beyond.
It was really
well
impressive.
Beyond anyone else in the NFL.
Kicks and punts too when he took those over.
Absolutely. Right. And just, and even going beyond the roster, like all the ways that, especially in that 2019 season, the ways that they worked at the margins to be more efficient than other teams by going for it on fourth down, by trying to go for 2 points when it made sense in the context of the game flow. So, there are so many things, just to kind of circle back, that they don't have that you would necessitate a Super Bowl contender having. But then again, I mean, we're like 2 years removed from the San Francisco 49ers being one play away from winning the Super Bowl, basically. And I don't know, if you kind of substitute the Ravens' cornerback strength being the 49ers, front 7 strength or front 4 strength, specifically, I don't really know if there's that many material differences just in terms of like how those teams went about their business. And I don't think a team like the Ravens, despite being as run heavy as they are, that can't be a disqualifying factor at this point in the NFL for how a team can win games. Obviously, I think it's 2 years in a row now that they've had the NFL's biggest point differential. So I think you combine all that, you combine the fact that they're having a normal offseason, you combine the fact that Lamar finally looked like he was comfortable throwing outside the numbers in minicamp. And
you mentioned the continuity. This is it might be unprecedented for the Ravens to have offensive and defensive coordinators both for this long as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And even special teams with Chris Horton there. He was basically Jerry. He was the deputy there for a long time. So it's easy for me to say, like, why not? Why couldn't they be the AFC's best team, and they might end up being that way. At this point in the offseason, you especially coming off as strong at practice as they did in that second day of minicamp, it's easy to be, starry-eyed and blue-skied and all that kind of thing. But, I mean, it doesn't take long for the realities of the NFL and injuries and one bad game for the Ravens to confront all the weaknesses that they have, and for me to do it with them. So I think they feel pretty good about where they are. I certainly would. The most important position in sports is quarterback, and the Ravens have a pretty good one in Lamar, and he's still younger than Joe Burrow. For as long as he plays, he will be younger than Joe Burrow. So I feel good about where they are, but I think I'm probably an optimist by nature compared to someone like my good friend Mike Preston.
Oh, we love Mike, but I think it's well put, and I think one thing that we also kind of like, that I think we talked about this last week, maybe, is kind of feels like they're flying under the radar a little bit. It feels like every, you mentioned like First Take and all those shows, it's like the talking point is like, oh, coming up next, why Cleveland is the favorite in the AFC North, and it just kind of feels like Buffalo just kind of naturally leapfrogged them. I think for some good reasons, for that number 2 spot. Kansas City, obviously number 1, but they're just kind of quietly going about their business right now, which I think compared to all the Super Bowl talk of the last, couple off seasons or whatever it might be with Lamar, I think kind of just getting that contract with him done and dusted and getting everything ready for the regular season is going to be crucial. But great answer on that. And we'll close you out with, with what you've seen so far, what is kind of one storyline that you think isn't being talked about enough as training camp is kind of on the horizon here?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think all the ramifications of this Lamar Jackson contract situation are just endlessly fascinating to me, at least. I think Mike Florio pointed out, and other people have as well, that with Lamar not retaining representation, he basically doesn't have a buffer with Eric DaCosta and the Ravens negotiators who are going to be telling him, we think you're worth this much, and Lamar says, no, I think I'm worth this much. We just don't know, what I would give to be on the fly on the wall of those discussions. It is just the mind wanders with the kind of infinite possibilities of what might be happening, during this kind of off-season hiatus. Because it seems like, the smoke signals out of Baltimore that, a deal could get done before training camp or before the season starts. And just kind of on a bigger picture look than that, like how much are Buffalo and Cleveland with Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield waiting to see whether a deal might get done, because of the fact that the indications are that a deal will get done. And, could what the Ravens do with Lamar, how much of a ripple effect will that have in Cleveland? How much of a ripple effect will that have in Buffalo? Because, let's say Lamar gets a deal below what, we kind of consider market rate for Lamar, which is like $40 million a year. Let's say he gets like 35 because of, I don't know, whatever. Does Buffalo Brandon Beane use that to his advantage? Does the agent for Josh Allen say like, well, you can't point to that as a reasonable benchmark because Lamar wasn't retaining representation. He didn't have a normal agent.
Right.
Does Cleveland and Baker Mayfield's agent say the exact same thing? I think at this point, Baker has probably the least leverage of those 3 guys, just because he's playing behind the NFL's best offensive line. He still wasn't all that great last year, for being honest. So it is just really, really intriguing to me how many dominoes could fall with Lamar, depending on all that.
Is whoever signs first going to be the lowest paid guy, and then Josh Allen's going to go, oh, well, I want more than Lamar? And is it vice versa? Does Lamar say, I want more than Josh Allen?
Right. And, it is just that age-old battle between past performance and potential and projection and that kind of thing, because Lamar's the MVP. He's the only guy of those 3 who has an MVP award in his trophy case. But Josh Allen is also coming off a season where he, broke all kinds of records, was more accurate than Lamar has ever been in the NFL or in college. He obviously has the kind of skill set that pays for itself. Lamar obviously has his own kind of skill set that makes life so much easier for everyone on the offense. But Josh Allen has the golden arm. Baker Mayfield has the number 1 draft pick. And, he has the honor and the privilege of being the guy who finally took Cleveland back to the postseason. So, it is just this game of one-upsmanship, as you pointed out, Spencer. We just don't know how things are going to shake out. But if being the last guy to sign is going to make you $2 or $3 million more a year than the other guys, when you want to be the guy holding out, especially because both of these guys' futures are secured through 2022, or all three of these guys' futures are secured through 2022. It's just, this could go in so many different ways, and I just don't know, who's going to fall first, basically.
Definitely. Well, it's going to be fascinating to watch. We know you're going to be following it intensely, as are we, and we're going to be following your analysis on it as well. Thanks a ton for joining us, buddy. Hope an hour with us two dummies wasn't too much for you. You had some fun, got to chop up your job in a way that you don't always get to. Really appreciate it. Why don't you go ahead and plug your stuff for all our listeners? I'm sure a lot of them are already familiar, but for anyone who isn't, where can they find you and your work?
Yeah, just twitter.com, Jonas_Shafer, Jonas, like the Jonas Brothers, and then Shafer, Shaffer. Yeah, that's about it. Follow Ravens Insider on Twitter, read our stuff at Baltimore Sun. Obviously, going to be a bit of a dead period for content because all the guys are scattered to the winds and we don't have a whole lot to do until training camp. But I'm sure we'll have plenty of good stuff on the Lamar contract situation and just all the various hypotheticals that we kind of wonder about during these 5 or 6 weeks where not a whole lot's going on.
Definitely. Well, thanks again. You have yourself a great night, a great rest of your week and weekend, and hopefully we'll do this again real soon, okay?
Enjoy yourself while you got this little lull time, too. Get some R&R because it's going to be a busy season.
Might have some time to go get a haircut. Imagine that.
There you go. Exactly. All right, man.
All right, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Gorlami.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci. Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.